everybody, welcome to Catherine Sews. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I've got a really nice, easy, very beginner friendly way of cutting down a pair of pants to make them smaller while adding a pocket at the same time. These were my mom's. My mom has recently moved into long-term care, and so there were a lot of clothes that she just didn't need anymore. So I really like the pattern of these pants. They're just a simple elastic waist, so I'm gonna cut them down to my size, but add in a pocket at the same time in a really nice beginner-friendly way. So I'm gonna start by just slipping the pants on inside out, pinning away the excess, and then when I cut, I'll leave that little extension for the pocket. For the pocket itself, I'm going to use this bright blue lining so that you can see what I'm doing, so I'm not just working black on black. So if that sounds good to you, let's just get busy. So I've got them on inside out, and you can see they are quite large, and I'll need that extra room in order to make that extension for the pocket. There are ways to add pockets without having that extension, but today I want to show you just a real easy way. So I'm working side to side and pinning out the excess, trying to be equal on both sides. And I want the pins to form a line that is going to show me where to sew. So my pins are vertical, not horizontal. Now, if I needed to, I could take some out of the inseam here too, which, you know what, I think I might as well. Just about an inch on either side. So these have a nice wide leg. I think it's really gonna make a nice pair of pants for me. Maybe a smidge tighter in the waist. And I'll just need to make sure that I can still pull them on and off. There's no fly, and so that still needs to be able to just slide off over my hip. I'll see if I can get them off, and then we'll cut. So having them on inside out just makes that whole process so much easier. So I can see my line of pins. It kind of comes in and out. I'm going to smooth out that line, but I want to also compare this side with the other side. So with them folded neatly in half, I want to bring those edges together so that I can just feel where my pins are on that underlayer. Oh, okay. So here you can see the difference in my pins. So I just want to split that difference. So I'll have one in between on this side and one in line with that on that side. And then just make sure those are the same. Yes, okay. Alrighty, and then yes, I'll continue to split the difference. I feel one here. I can feel it right there. Isn't that the cutest pin cushion? My niece got me that from Japan. Isn't that sweet? So I can feel one pin here, one here. So I'm going to split the difference, put my pin in between where those two are. And I can take out the back one then. These two are more or less in line with each other, so that's fine, but it dents in, so I want to smooth out that line, so I'll go here. So I'm pinning through both layers now, and make sure I don't have any pins hiding on the back, because I don't want to hit that with my rotary cutter. Alrighty, and then having a stripe like this makes life easier too, because I can just taper off along a stripe and keep this nice wide leg. So, don't cut yet. First, I'm going to draw that line with my curved rule. If you don't have a nice curved rule like this, you can eyeball it. You can just make a nice smooth line. There is a link for a ruler like this in the description box. You will not die without one, but it is nice to have. So what I'm marking here is my new sewing line, right? And then blending down. I don't want to deal with the hem and everything. The length is good for me. So I'm just going to come straight down and blend out before I get to that hem. So that's the new sewing line. The new cutting line is going to be a little bit out from that. I don't think I'm going to leave a full ½ inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, and I'm still not cutting. Okay. I want the pocket to start, let's say, about 1.5 inches from the waistband. That would be the opening of the pocket. And then I want that opening to be, let's say, 6 inches. And now I want that extension to be a little bit wider than the pocket opening, at least a good, let's say, 3/4 of an inch on each side. Okay, so that's my extension. I've got more fabric here than here. This is my limiting area. So if I just take that right to the serging so that I don't have to unpick it, that means I'm going 3/4 of an inch past my cutting line. Good, just like that. So I'm going to continue that down 3/4 of an inch. Good. All right. So now this is my new cutting line, just like that. So this extension that I'm building in here means that the pocket is never going to show. So that's why I'll be able to use this bright blue lining to make my pocket piece. And it's just a nice, straightforward, beginner-friendly way of doing this. Alrighty, so I'm going to cut on my new line now. Making sure my edges are actually nicely together and blends in here. And it's thick here, so I might just do 2 layers at a time. Okay. Now, while I have my pants folded like this, let's look at the inseam too. The inseam sits different, right? Because the back is always wider than the front. Make sure it's nicely flattened out there. Don't let any folds happen in there. Good. And these are the same, about 1 inch on each side. So that is my new sewing line. Do you see how that curved ruler fits into that inseam so nicely? I'm just going to now tilt it to meet my new cutting line. And then I can just add seam allowance on the same way. I'm just eyeballing it this time. I'm not taking so much off that inseam, right? I still have a good amount of curve. If I was taking a lot of the inseam, I would lose that curve and it would sit funny along the crotch. So I think I'm going to be fine just taking that 1 inch. So to cut my pocket, I've got a piece of lining folded in 4, and this piece is 24 inches by 16 inches, and I want one edge to equal the length of my extension, and I think I will just do that edge straight. My curve on that pocket piece is so slight, I think I'm going to be fine with that being straight. Many people make their pockets just too small. I want it to easily encase my whole hand, so I'm going to go about like that. And I could definitely clean up my line using my curved ruler, or I can just clean it up while I cut it. And my pocket piece is not going to go into the waistband. If it was, I would make it straight here, but my waistband is already finished, so I don't want to mess around with that. Good. I'm going to sew 1 to each side of the front and 1 to each side of the back. And this is the right side of the front, so I'm putting that right side together. And then 1 onto each side of the back. Okay, so I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, sew that just at the edge of my presser foot, like just a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then finish my edges. I'm going to use the serger, but you can use a zigzag if you don't have a serger. And in fact, if you do have a serger, you can just serge. You don't have to sew and serge first, but I think I will sew and then serge. Oh. Let's turn the machine on. That's pro tip number 1. Turn your machine on. The back is the only seam that's going to show when you look inside. The front is going to get folded in. And so the back is the only one that I need to serge. Now the 2 on the front are going to be enclosed in the pocket, kind of laying under the pocket, so I won't need to serge these ones. So since I'm not going to be serging it and I want that to stay nicely tucked into the pocket, I'm going to now turn and understitch. This is a bit more advanced for any beginners, but all I'm doing is turning, and you can definitely do your back tack, cut your thread, start, you can start again. I'm just flipping, but my seam allowance is coming off to my left and the lining is covering that. And then I want to open. I don't want to sew this down like that. I want to floop, get that right nice and open. And I'm going to sew 1 millimeter or 2 on that lining side. That just holds the lining to the inside of the pocket so that it can't kind of slide and poke out. And that's called understitching. It's a really useful skill to have. You'll use it a lot. So both fronts like that. So with my needle down, I just flip. Seam allowance is going off to my left. The lining covers the seam allowance. And then I sew that 1 millimeter or 2 on top of the lining. So let's run to the serger for those 2 back seams. So the front is understitched and then the backs are getting serged or zigzagged. Okay, pockets are in place, so now we're just putting everything back together. So I'm putting the front to back, right sides together. I'm going to do the waistband back together in kind of a cheater's way because it's all finished. I could open it up and flip one around the other, and I just don't think I'm going to. I'm going to keep life easy. So I just want to line up those top edges, pin there, get that all nicely lined up and pin. And then we're going to be sewing down around the pocket and down. That's it. So this little extension is what is going to make the pocket recede into the side seam. So that's why you'll never see this bright blue fabric. Let's bring the corners back together. Make sure the pocket bag is sitting nice. And then we're just blending back into that original seam, which is here. I want to blend into that original seam, so no problem. Nicely lined up here. We definitely don't want to see a difference between the front and the back. We're cheating enough already here by not opening this up, so we want to make our little cheat invisible. Okay, that is good. So down around the pocket and down. That's it. Now, if I want to, I could mark that 6-inch opening. Yeah, maybe this is good for you to see what I'm doing. I want that 6-inch opening here. Good. So I'll come down, around, and turn like that. So I want to get those two edges right underneath my presser foot. Otherwise, the presser foot is going to like push that top one out of the way, and then they won't stay lined up. I don't like sewing over pins with this machine, so I just take them out at the last minute. So I'm going to come down to my pivot point there. And then go right around my pocket. Do a nice clean pivot at your corners. Now I'm just coming down the side seam and I'm going to blend into the original seam. And I want a nice smooth blend. So that needs a bit of edge finishing, either zigzag or serge. And same on the second side. And before I run back to the serger to finish those edges, I'm just going to close up the inseam. So there's one side. I'm going to bring it seam to seam with the other side. There's where it's going to blend back together. So one more pin halfway along will be fine. So now I'm starting at one seam. I want to overlap that original seam and just close up that inseam. And blending back into the seam on the other side. So before I serge now, I'm going to try them on, make sure I'm happy, see if I want to take in any more, and then if it's all good, I'll see you at the serger. I did end up taking them in just another 1/2 inch on both sides of the waist, and then just tapered that right back into the original seam. So now I'm just going to serge edges, and it's pretty thick here, so I definitely want to start off slow. So now I'm serging down the side seam and around the pocket. So you always have to be careful when you encounter corners on the serger. I don't want to cut right into it. So all you do, you just straighten it out. And then the same thing here. I don't want to cut right into my side seam. So I'll just straighten it out. That's one side seam. I'll go up and around the inseam. And then up the other side seam. One last thing back at the regular machine. So here's the back. I want this seam allowance to stay going toward the front. so that that pocket is encouraged to stay going toward the front. I also at the same time want to deal with this serger tail. I'm going to take care of both at the same time. I'm bringing my serger tail right on top of my serged edge, and I'm just going to back tack this in place. Now, you're never going to see this black thread, like this little line of stitching I'm doing. It is going to show on the front, on the outside, but I really don't think it's going to be a problem. It's just going to look like one extra line of stitching, no big deal. Okay, so I've crossed over that serger tail. I'm trying to make my line of stitching parallel to my side seam here. And can you see my serger tail there? I'm just sewing it right down. As long as I catch it in a few places, that's fine. That'll keep it out of the way. I just don't like to cut a serger tail at a finished edge because the chain will kind of start coming out and then you get loose threads poking up. There's the line of stitching. It did not end up parallel to my seam at all. It's coming in on an angle, but I'm going to go with that. It's a design decision. Same on the other side, just sewing that serger tail down while I sew this seam allowance going toward the front. And I can give those side seams a final press, and then these are done. Let me show you the finished product. Okay, so those are done. I hope you found that pretty fast and pretty easy. I think the pocket worked out great. You have to look pretty deep inside that pocket to see the bright blue lining. So that little extension is a really nice way to kind of hide your pocket, get it into that seam allowance at the same time that you're taking in a pair of pants that are just too big. So I'm really glad to have made my mom's pants fit me and turned them into something that I will enjoy wearing. So if you like that, if you found that helpful or inspiring, feel free to hit that subscribe button and give it a thumbs up. It means a lot and it really helps me a lot. So until next time on Catherine Sews, you take care.